related to the fiscal 22 budget. Each year, each department will be introduced and the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment or questions. Please hold until your name is called. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. Finally, if there is any votes, each vote will be taken in this meeting by roll call vote. And so as we move to our agenda, basically we will, I guess we'll just go right into the budget. And we've decided that we're going to go in the order of how it's listed. And so it will actually start with the general government. And Lynn, you may want to just talk a little bit about the goals, I guess, and then go into with Paul Pasterzik, talk about general government. And then after that, we'll hit as in order, public safety, planning, community development, schools, public works, etc.
Sure. So under general government, one of the major changes this year, this in FY22 would be the addition of a planning and community development director and assistant town manager position that comprises the bulk of the increase in that area. Additionally, there's some changes in the treasurer collector's office with the position of the shared position of treasurer collector, town clerk not being recommended due to limited public interaction. There's reduction in utilizing consulting services for the assessor's office, and a reduction in election costs because of no anticipated federal or state elections in FY22. And those are kind of the larger things in general government. I don't know if there were specific questions related to that, or if you want me to go into more detail.
All right, well, we could start with that. And so I guess my first question is, you've merged this planning and community development role together. And do you want to talk a little bit about more why that's important to the town and how you see that making a more valuable contribution than what we had prior to this?
Sure. So the Planning and Community Development Director is a position that was created in the charter or called out in the charter, but never filled. And so with reviewing over the past year and a half, identifying some areas that I feel we need more support, that is a critical area that I do think we would benefit, all the town departments would benefit from additional staff resources there. Coupled with the retirement of the finance director who serves in a slight capacity as assistant town manager, I thought that this would prove to be a good time to look at that planning and community development director position and modify it to also serve as the assistant town manager. This structured position does exist in other communities, and it's been pretty beneficial over the last few years in terms of going after grants that the state has made available in the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, green communities, a lot of the sustainability and climate change efforts, as well as planning for what the future of our growth and or redevelopment might be. This is an area where I feel like we need to be proactively thinking about what the long-term master planning of the town will look like. So that's my goal with that position. Some of the grants that are available also allow for administrative costs to absorb some of the funds for that position as well. So I do think that we'll be able to capture some limited funds back from those grants to help support that role.
Okay, so Lynn, this year, COVID and all the demands of keeping up with how to keep this town safe, employees safe, relocate town offices and voting structures and town meetings. I would imagine that, we we missed out on a lot of opportunities for grants, and that's sort of what you're looking for. Do you think that this person would be able to pull in enough money through grants that would even cover their salary?
The total grants awards, yes, I think that's entirely possible. But just for the administrative fees that the grant allows you to submit for, probably not. But the overall grant award, yes, I think, one or two good grant awards would more than cover the salary of that position.
Okay,
Or I
thank you.
should say the return on investment would be more than covering that.
Okay, and then the other question I have is, when you look at the different roles, the planning role and the assistant town manager, what kind of split would you see? Would you see it 70-30, 60-40, 50-50?
Yeah, I think initially, I would want that person to focus more on the planning, community development role than serving as assistant town manager. This is an area that we need somebody really to focus in, at least for the next few months, to get us to the point where we can really be aggressive in pursuing these grant opportunities. But then after that, once we kind of get our footing under us in what planning and community development offers, then I think I would anticipate having that person really take on more of the assistant town manager role.
Okay, and then in applying for grants, is it a cycle that is predictable? Like, is it every quarter that you would apply, or is it twice a year?
It really depends on what the state has available. So right now, both the Green Communities and the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grants will be opening this spring. And then they're both due within a few months of each other. But Green Communities this year has broken it out into 2 grant rounds, which is something they haven't done before. So it really depends on the grant and the state funding cycle and the state funds.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions from board members? I see Mark Gold. Yes, go ahead.
Lynn, just a little bit more about that position, only in that the salary seems to be split into a few lines. You've got it under assistant town manager, you've got it under planning and community development. And I guess my problem is I guess I'm seeing 2/3 is under the assistant town manager and 1/3 you've, just for accounting purposes, you've got under the planning and community development. So the total is like $77,500. Am I reading that correct?
Yes.
Correctly? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I guess my other question, because we pushed so hard for it, and I know it hasn't been used, but the reduction in what we'd called the innovation fund, which was really, pardon the expression, the town manager's available funding to do new ideas. Was that a balancing the budget kind of move, or is that really something that you saw you didn't think that we needed? It's only a couple $1,000s, but we pushed really hard to get that $5,000 in there a few years ago.
If you don't mind, I'll take that, only because a lot of times, Mark, we look at the trends of the expenditures. And in FY19, we only spent almost $1,400 there. FY20, we didn't spend anything. So it's one of those things, yes, it's half balancing the budget, but at the same time, if the money's not being utilized, we don't want it to absorb whatever funds we do have for other purposes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Well, thank you, Lynn and Paul. And I guess we'll move from the general fund to public safety.
Okay, I will bring both chiefs in because I don't know which one you would like to start with.
Well, I guess we could start with the fire chief. He's had a pretty busy year.
Okay. Well,
And here I am.
I can hear you, John. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
So you have some comments about the budget, how you feel about it, or any big changes in it?
Yeah, not a lot of major changes. the budget as presented is level staffed and level service. You notice in the expense lines that there are some changes in there, and finally, after 6 years as fire chief, I'm starting to figure this out. So what we really looked at is the transfers we do at the end of the year. We have certain accounts that we do reoccurring transfers in. So we try to reallocate some of those expenditures to really make the budget more accurate. So we're saving Paul's team a little bit of work doing transfers at the end of the year. You know, some savings in some different areas. Some of the softwares, radio maintenance, things like that have been picked up by Westcom. So we don't have nearly the level of expenditure in that. And we've also changed some software. So there's, we've applied a little bit more cost towards emergency management where those softwares are utilized. So, and we're trying to modernize a little bit with our softwares to better come in line. One of the major changes we did with software this year was to align with Bay State with their, what they call the elite software. And that eliminates some expenditures on in-house software. So, but I did want to bring your attention that, you know, this is the same staffing level that we've had. We had some discussions last year about adding 2 additional employees. You know, that was revenue dependent. Our revenue has taken a little bit of a hit this year with COVID. I will tell you that our EMS runs are back to average the last 2 months. It does take a little while for revenue to catch back up. It's a 30 to 120 day cycle with Medicare, Medicaid, and the various healthcare systems, but I am fairly confident that we'll get back to our early 20 and 19 numbers. So again, the basis for the additional employees, so it was 2 firefighter paramedics, was based on our, you know, many years of coming back to you for overtime deficits in the year for call volume. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions from board members for Chief Mark Gold?
Thanks, Chief. Quick question about our annual concern, which is overtime in the fire department budget. You know, it's the budget is something like, I don't know, 15-18% overtime, and the question always comes up: at what point does it make sense to hire more people rather than pay overtime? And also applies to a lot of the question about, you know, where's the overtime coming from? Is it coming from, you know, people out backfilling for people who are out in runs, or is it coming from, you know, just the amount of vacation that's been accrued that people are out on vacation, or is it, you know, long-term or short-term illness? So do you have any feel for the overtime? You know, what's it due to, and also, you know, at what point more people will eliminate overtime rather than more people create more overtime, because it's permanent slots you got to backfill when they're out?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mark. The vast majority of our overtime is directly operational, so it is callback. Current model we operate under is we have 4 shifts staffed with 5 people. We will go down to a 4-person minimum when somebody's out sick, on vacation, things like that. That does require callback. And our call volume, you know, as I've reported in the past, over the last 5 years, we've seen a 36% increase in call volume. So we just don't have enough bodies to fill the seats that we need to provide the service. So the model I'm asking for is to bring 3 of the 4 shifts up to 6-person staffing to run certain hours at a 5-person minimum, which would eliminate callback overtime and also give us the operational capability to meet the service demand. So we've been very fortunate. Our number of long-term injuries and deployments right now is way down. So really all of our overtime now is directly related to operations.
Can I just clarify what you said, Chief, with you? So if we've got 5 people on a shift and you get an ambulance call, 2 people go out on that ambulance call, you're now down to 3. Does that first ambulance call trigger a call back to backfill? Or is it just when you get a second ambulance call on that shift, which would take you down to one person in the firehouse, that would trigger the overtime, the backfill overtime call?
Right, so yeah, your interpretation is exactly correct. So the 5-person staffing, the first ambulance goes out, there's no callback necessary. We operate with 3, that's adequate to meet the demands. When the second ambulance goes out, we do try to maintain a 3-person minimum to meet the other, I mean, that's run a fire truck out the door, really 3 people is the minimum. And again, it's a little bit dependent on daytime versus nighttime. During the daytime, our fire prevention officer will fill in, so we eliminate some overtime during the day there. We don't really put it, everybody fills in when we can, but that is the model right now. And if unfortunately at night we're down to 4 people, or in the rare weekends or whatever, almost every ambulance call will require a callback. So, and and again, we've seen a significant increase in our run volume over the past 4 or 5 years. So it's
So
probably
the
'cause you
argument,
hired me. So
the argument one could make is that we're paying the ambulance, we're paying the EMTs who are out on that call, the overtime essentially, because we're backfilling for them on overtime. So, that those EMT calls cost us premium pay, if you will. Is that almost an equivalent way to look at it then?
I don't know if I'd agree with you completely on that. When we look at the revenue generation, we're making more than what the actual cost of the call is. We average about $671. Well, not about, that's the current average of what we collect on an ambulance call. So the callback averages about $70. If somebody came in, we have a 2-hour minimum. So we're still, the revenue offsets the cost for operation there. So
No, and I'm not arguing that it doesn't. I'm just saying but because that second ambulance call, we have to backfill for, we're paying the overtime for costs for those backfilled EMTs.
yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that completely. No.
Okay, I mean, because that then helps justify the bringing additional staffing on, really.
Yeah, and not only for the cost, it does give us a tremendous operational capability. I will tell you that our experience, and this has been true since I was a captain or a firefighter, the difference between having 4 people respond to, whether it be a car accident or a house fire. The other night, the fire we had, which I missed your meeting, we had 5 people on duty, and that makes a world of difference, that one extra person. So I just think it provides us better service by having the appropriate staffing. So, and I'll be honest with you, my goal is to eventually, and I think the revenue will support it, is to get to 4 or 6-person shifts. Right now, I'm trying to meet in the middle somewhere, and be fiscally responsible. But I think that's where we need to be at some point, providing our run volumes continue to increase at the current rate.
Okay, thanks. My last question, Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask it, is, can you comment at all about the effect that the Westcom dispatch has had on your budget and your costs?
Yeah, so we actually are, within my department, under emergency management, we're responsible for the radio systems. So a couple different radio systems that we manage. One is the public safety radio system, and the other is the municipal radio system, which you have a capital item on this year. We paid with the public safety system, through my budget, I paid for all the maintenance, the vast majority of the maintenance on that. So that's basically cut that budget item in half. And 2 of the softwares that we use for call reporting are partially absorbed by Westcom. So I don't know the exact number, Mark, but we're saving money on that. So the other aspect too is we at times had to try to maintain people on our desk. We have a lot more operational flexibility now with Westcom. So we're putting more boots on the ground as a result of Westcom. We know somebody's there, they're covering our interests. So we're able to deploy people, not worry about, backfilling and taking care of the radio traffic. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Any other questions, Steve? Okay. Now, on the budget, it says special overtime. And is that the line item that you were speaking about, Mark?
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
the only overtime.
Because it looks at, it was at a peak at 2019 at 273,000, $654.
There were a lot of vacancies though that year, Tom. I remember.
Oh, okay, because it's down to 230. And it's kind of stayed the same from fiscal year 21. So
But there have been a couple of supplemental requests for overtime and the fact that we're spending the budgeted amount at the peak every year says that we're pushing the limits. That was my read on it anyway.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and Tom, historically, I mean, that budget was 203, 200, 190 prior to me becoming chief, and it's just that budget, that line item is just grown exponentially every year, and I've had to get supplements by 4 of my 5 years. Paul, you might know better than I have, but I call it my reoccurring theme. So,
All right. And that's, and so, when we look at, ambulance calls, which seems to really help out your department quite a bit, because of COVID, they've been down. And is there generally more calls in the summer? Does it make a difference? Do you see any difference?
we actually fall off slightly during the summer months. I can, and certainly I have a graph that I can certainly provide you on this. We tend to get a lull July, June, July, a little bit towards the end of June, July, August. We've always said everybody's away on vacation, nobody needs an ambulance. But that's less prevalent now than it ever was. We seem to be more consistent. Certainly the addition of the medical practices in town have increased our call volumes, the Dwight Road practices, the clinic and things like that. In the nursing home with their expansion, they've certainly that's increased our medical calls. So we service all those facilities.
Oh, great. Well, that's good news for, that we're here to help out and that it's been more consistent. And then, next year, hopefully things will all be back to normal. But actually it won't be because it'll be an increase because, that Dwight Road building hasn't been online that long, really.
Yeah, and I've really used the comparisons to our FY19 numbers in doing the analysis on this because that was the last normal year. I mean, part of this year is it was impacted by COVID and certainly the last half of last year. So it's difficult to make comparisons with the revenue. And again, we had times in COVID when we were having surges and times where nobody wanted to use an ambulance. So in my analysis, I look back to 19 and we're not that far off on 19 numbers. But again, Paul tries to make Paul and I work together on the projections, and this year was next to impossible to project because nobody knew it was going to happen. So,
All right, thank you. Mark, you have another question?
Yeah, just another quick follow-up. The vehicle maintenance line with the bringing online our DPW facility with a pretty Class A maintenance facility. Do we anticipate bringing any of that in-house? And number one, number two, maybe it's a Lynn and Paul Pasturza question. Do we kind of wash that if there's cost involved, or does that cost go to the DPW, or do they charge it to the fire department so the costs don't go down in this budget item, but show as revenue to if there's such a thing as revenue to the DPW maintenance?
I believe the cost.
Mark, if I could, but Mark, so we've had a lot of discussions about that, and I'm really excited, especially since I've seen the facility, about the capabilities down there. One of the things, if we can bring that in-house, it's going to save me some labor time because now I'm moving vehicles all over the place to do certain things. So I will a lot of times, unfortunately, that's on overtime because I don't have staff to send to Windsor Locks or West Springfield or there. So that alone will save me money. And once that comes online, they can't do everything for us. Obviously, they can't work on pumps and things like that, but certainly, I pay over $300 for oil change in an ambulance right now. If we can cut that cost and keep it in house, there is savings there. So I am excited about that opportunity.
I was
Okay,
just gonna add, at this point, there's no internal service costs that are being transmitted to the different departments. It's all borne by the DPW. But given the fact that they have other capabilities, it might be something that we monitor into the future. So that the DPW budget doesn't get hit totally with all these additional cost of the labor and or the parts and lubricants and things of that nature. It's something that would have to be monitored.
Well, we saw the lift, and the lift can lift the fire engine, so
Absolutely.
I hope we use it. Thanks, Tom.
okay, great. So thank you, Chief. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to Mr. Stocks, our Chief of Police.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I guess I just want to start by saying it's my first budget, so certainly a difficult year to jump in here because really everything was atypical. It was hard to get a grasp on the expenditures in essence because of everything being suspended. I mean, everything from training to on top of that, also the unprecedented amount of turnover the Longmeadow Police Department has experienced over the past 12 months. As we all know, Chief Stankwith retired, Captain Gary Fontaine retired, Sergeant Andy Fullerton retired, Officer Scott Mura just retired. So I had to make a new chief, which is me. I had to make a new captain, a new lieutenant, 3 new sergeants, 2 new detectives. I had to hire 3 new officers, one of whom has already left to go to Wilbraham, and we are currently in the process of hiring an additional person to get that position filled. To say I've been busy would be an understatement, but I like staying busy, and Lynn's been extremely helpful, as well as Paul. Anytime I had a question regarding the budget, they've been there for me. So just to, I guess, cast a little light on what the current budget forecast is for FY22 for the PD. The only thing I looked at was, we had collective bargaining agreements, some raises for the wages there for the patrolmen and the supervisors. I also increased the overtime budget commensurate with the salary increases to see if I could stay on top of that. It ended up being a $7,500 increase to the overtime line item. I also, come January, we do shift bid once a year here at the Longmeadow Police Department per contract. I kind of restructured the organization a little bit in an effort to see if I could save some overtime costs there, because I know overtime is obviously on everyone's agenda, is kind of keeping an eye on it, myself included. One of the big ones I made, and I think it's going to be both for operational benefit as well as monetary, is we used to have the lieutenant's position on the day shift. So I moved the lieutenant to the 4 to 12 shift. So I now have a lieutenant and a sergeant. So it's beneficial in the sense I do have a hierarchy of rank structure. It's better oversight for the patrol operation. It also adds an insulation so that if that sergeant and or lieutenant goes out sick or on vacation or injured, I have a boss, if you will, a supervisor that can still maintain the shift, and I don't have to fill that with overtime. Rough numbers, I'm looking at maybe a savings of 14 to 15,000 this year just in that move alone. So I'm pretty excited about that. Everyone's excited about that because it actually affords people too the ability to take time off without being denied. So if we have the staffing there, I don't have burnout, and I also we have some cost savings as well as operationally. It's a great oversight. The only other line item I see that we increased a little bit was the training budget, and that's only due to the fact that this past year of COVID, again, a lot of my trainings were suspended and or canceled. Fortunately, the mandated ones through the state, the in-service training, if you will, those were offered online. So I was able to get my officers to maintain certification through online training. Not the greatest training. I prefer in person. I think online training has some limitations, but we're going to do the best we can there. I also, as a chief, kind of made the determination I suspended all in-person training, specialty training, only because I wanted to keep my officers safe and have limit the interaction just to mitigate and or eliminate the potential for COVID. However, the downside to all that is all the training that we need to kind of keep up speed with is we're gonna have to do some catch up. So I did increase my training budget a little bit to see if I could kind of bolster it a little bit so I could have enough funding to get my officers back into the training. Again, I can't say enough about training. My predecessor was big about it. Really, Long Meadow PD is big about training. I honestly think that's the backbone of a good officer in a good department. So I did increase the training budget by 3,000. I know we're trying to keep it tight, but I feel as though anything was going to help, and I have a feeling I'm going to be utilizing all of that. Other than that, the only other thing I'd like to bring to your attention is I asked for it. It wasn't granted in this budget cycle, but I would ask the Board of Selectmen just to, with all respect, just give some consideration. The only thing I saw, it was forecasted, but I'm not sure if it was correctly or accurately forecasted, was with Westcom, the regional dispatch, by taking our dispatchers out of the station, we're left with what we call a dark station. I'm sure you all are aware with that term now, but you know, during the day shift, I was able to hire a part-time employee where she works 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. But other than those hours, if my officers are on the road, this station, there's really nobody here, especially after you know, 1 p.m., 4 p.m. Sometimes when people are getting out of the normal business day and they're coming to do, whether it be a medication drop off, they're looking for information, they want to get a license to carry a firearm, file a report. There's no longer that face-to-face interaction. I think we all knew that. I'm just finding it kind of hurts as being here 23-year-long veteran of this department. We've always had that community aspect, the tight-knit function of the PD, and we're kind of lacking that now. And you got to hit a button and you're talking to Westcom, and sometimes there's an excessive delay in getting an officer off the street into the station if they're on call. So anyways, long-winded response to my request is I'd like to see if I can increase the hours of that part-time employee that we originally hired to do the 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Her name is Brittany. She does have a criminal justice background. She's a phenomenal employee. She's just she has a feel for what the public needs. She works at Amherst College part-time as an officer. She was a full-time officer there. She's since reeled back some hours. She took us on as a part-time employee. She's willing to go on full-time if she could as well. But I've kind of, based on her abilities and just how good she is with all functions of the department, she's taken on the license to carry processing, which is, if on a side note, we've doubled our numbers from last year, our license to carry applications. People are coming in droves. I think we did 1,800 in the past 6 months, and then the 6 months a year ago, the same 6-month time frame, we did about 900. So, and for every license to carry we do, the town does get $25 for each license to carry that they've processed. Anyways, she's there. I'd like to get her to work like a 9 to 5 schedule. I find a business hour just to get a face in the lobby. I'm finding that we're just lacking that interpersonal you know, benefit that the LPD was always known for, that professionalism, but also that close-knit community. We've kind of gotten a little impersonal, and I've noticed some of the response from the citizens has been less than happy with us. I mean, they're still happy with our service, but I have gotten a couple of the comments saying, geez, I don't like this intercom thing. So I am asking for an increase to her hours, but I know there's also a benefit package issue and all that. But Lynn and I have talked about it offline quite a bit along with Paul. There may be something down the lines, but if the Board of Selectmen could at least kind of just put an earmark on that topic for me, so maybe we can discuss it at a later date, I'd really appreciate it. I could probably sell it even further, but I don't want to take up all my time here on that. So other than that, I'm open for questions.
Okay, well, thanks, Chief Stocks. But that, you know, as the select board discussed Westcom, I mean, we knew that this station wouldn't have a person there to answer the door, you know, and you know, the technology that we have now really makes a big difference. And you know, you look at places like, you know, Mass Mutual, one of the largest employers of the area, and it's basically an empty building. You know, there's a lot of places that are, you know, technology's changed that, but we'll, you know, I'm open-minded. You know, I think what I would like to see is some stats about, you know, the number of people who actually attend, you know, come to the building, and that you're concerned about in terms of looking at that. But overall, your budget looks great. I mean, it's actually minus, right, 1.94%, but I know a big part of that is because of the Westcom assessment, which has changed quite a bit, and but the dispatchers and so forth. But no, I think it was a great budget, and I'll keep that in mind. We can discuss that more. Any questions from other members of the board? Mark Gold?
Thanks, Chief. Thanks a lot. Just a kind of a heads up, the two line items that always seem to come up in the police budget, just in case you haven't gone through this before, is the line on crossing guards, the other one on vehicles. So I'm going to bring them both up. Can you talk a little bit about crossing guards and how that came to be what it is, and numbers of crossing guards changing, staying the same, pay changing, staying the same? The other one on vehicles, I'll just kind of tell, I believe that we used to go through a 223 kind of vehicle purchase. And nowadays with police vehicles, it's tough to tell what's in there with this budget and how many vehicles it is. And if you could just talk about that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So the crossing guards, kind of a convoluted process. I looked into it. We kind of went back and forth a little bit because the numbers kind of moved around on us years past. My administrative assistant actually did an analysis of the numbers. Basically, what we came down to is it's a finite number of dispatchers, or excuse me, crossing guards that we have. Essentially, we have 23 crossing guard posts. And then what we factored in is the hours per post that they utilize. On top of that, what we did was we included the half days in the summertime. Now I know, again, this going back to why I said this one was a little bit difficult because it was tough to analyze. But with the half days and the pool crossings, we had to account for that as well. So what we did is, I'm just trying to pull up the actual numbers for you so I can really bore you to tears with it. Give me 1 second here, Mark. We worked it out to essentially I don't have the, Mark, I can email the board if you want the actual numbers and how I came across it, but it was the 23 crossing guard posts times their hours times their rate. And then on top of that, there are some half days along the school year in which some schools adhere to the half day schedule where others did not. So we accounted for those days as well. And then we included the pool crossing schedule. And what that came out to be with their current rate is the number of that we have is 162,266. If that,
But that's the same, that's an equal number of crossing guards as we've had, although I don't know how many this year because the schools, but that we've had historically.
Yes, I don't believe we had any increase over last year. I think it's been 23 for the past 2 years, Mark. And like I said, and I will get you, I'm going to give you the breakdown I have. I just can't seem to have it pulled up right here right now.
Yeah, no, what you've given us so far tonight is fine. Yeah, at some point that would be great to have more, but what we've done so far is fine.
As far as the cruisers, so currently the LPD has 13 cars in its fleet. And I know, right now we're on a cycle of 2 cruisers per year. I didn't increase the line item, even though I think I might be really tight this year. I'm pretty excited though. We just implemented a hybrid cruiser. I had a lot of feedback from community members asking when the PD was going to go hybrid. We were a little reticent in implementing them early on because it was such a new technology as far as policing. I mean, hybrid vehicles have been around forever, not forever, but long enough. But for the police atmosphere, there are additional demands that are placed on them. So we want to make sure they're tried and true. So we literally just implemented our new first hybrid police cruiser kind of as a trial period. Ford is claiming tremendous fuel savings. I'm waiting to get that number to make sure that's the case. It does, they do cost approximately $4,000 more than an equivalent conventional gas powered police cruiser. So I got to make sure that we're making enough gas savings to make this worthwhile. I am excited to learn though, Lynn's going to help me with it because she was able to find the Green Community Grant, which is going to give us a $5,000 a grant towards the purchase of a police cruiser, which is why I didn't increase the line item for next year. It's $83,000. I think the $5,000 will probably keep me right in line if we do go with 2 hybrids. Hybrid cruiser, just for argument's sake, is about 38,000, and that's not equipped at all. A gas cruiser is about 34 and change. And that doesn't include the equipment. The equipment is, believe it or not, that is where it can get really costly. And Ford just redesigned the Ford Explorer, which they call the Interceptor utility. A lot of the old equipment that we could switch over, I mean, the lights we can do, but as far as like the internal prisoner cage, the computer mounts, the dash camera, unfortunately, it's not just a swap over like we typically do. So there's added money there, but that's a different line item I can get out of my equipment line item. I'm not forecasting a big surplus of funds at the end of this fiscal year, fiscal year 22, but I think I'm going to work towards it because I know, again, the town wants to kind of remain level funded. And right now, out of the 13 cruisers, Mark, I think years ago, I know you wanted us to increase our mileage on the cruisers, which it was actually not a bad idea. I mean, gone are the days where 100,000 is the end of the life for the cruiser. You know, they've gotten much more better, much more resilient, much more durable. Unfortunately, I think, you know, really 115, 120 is it doesn't sound like a lot, but these cruisers are beat by that point. So, you know, we're extending the life of these quite a bit over what we used to. And if you figure engine hours too, that's another thing you got to consider. But out of my fleet of 13, come July, I'll have 7 of my 13 will be over 100,000 mile cruisers. So with a 222 cycle right now, Mark, I think we're good. Right now, I'm going to try to make it work. I know if I come to you looking for 3 cruisers, that's going to be a real eyebrow raiser. So again, my first year here, I'm going to do my best, but I've got a good forecast on the cruisers. I think we're okay right now. If I can get the hybrids in there, I'd like to see some cost savings for fuel, but again, I've only got a couple thousand miles on the unit right now, so I'll report back to you guys as soon as I know more about this hybrid and make sure it's worthwhile for the town.
Thank you very much, Chief. My only response is that what's always been asked is, why does a police department that has 5 people on the roads at any given time need 13 vehicles? And we won't go through that discussion again, but I think you know where that's coming from, and we'll probably have that discussion again at some point.
Okay, any other questions from the select board? Okay. Yeah, I guess the 115,000 miles on a cruiser, they probably are running and being parked for probably a lot further than 115,000. So that engine is running a lot, right? That's probably the big factor.
Yeah, that's what you analyze now is the engine hours, because that's really the wear and tear. And on top of that, the cruiser may look halfway decent at that point, but when you drive it and you're trying to go around the shaker curve by the LCC, to a choking baby call or to assist a fire call, and the guys are trying to move. These cars do get a little beat up and they get loose, and they get a little rattly, and they get a little less confident, and things start to break inside. So, I mean, these things are our office. I mean, you guys have all heard, I'm sure, the arguments for years now. I won't bore you with it again, but my office is spending hours and hours on these things, and there is a certain life cycle where they put an end to it. I mean, I don't know what the town's feelings are. I know back in the day, we used to take the cruiser as well for police, the application. It might be done at 115, but it's a great car for another town office to use if they just run around town doing water meter checks, or the building commissioner. Rather than going to buy a brand new car for 30,000, I could hand over a cruiser that really can still run. It's not going to be good for emergency response. But I know with the green community and trying to be save on gas fuel, there's also that issue to consider. But again, it's something to consider down the road for you guys.
Okay, and now one of the goals of our town is to become a more green community. And are there any departments using electric cars? I know it would save us a lot in fuel, and probably would, a lot of electric cars, when you're parked, the engine shuts off and it runs on battery. Is there any departments using them? Do you think you have any idea of maybe that you would look at moving towards an electrical vehicle for police?
So right now, Tom, like I said, I think the hybrid is just starting to seep out into the police field. Again, I know we're not inner city, but there is a lot of wear and tear on a cruiser. Think about all the electronics that are drawing for these things. So it's not like you can just go down to the Tesla showroom and grab a Tesla. It needs to be upfitted. I know there are some departments out in California that are running them, But in Long Meadow, I think the DPW had a small electric vehicle they grabbed, and I'm not sure if it's still running. Locally, I don't know of any PDs that use it around here. I think some of the bigger cities like New York will use it for parking enforcement, but as far as line driving, if the crews are responding to calls, it's not there yet. It will be. I mean, we're all going to be, everything's going to be electric eventually, obviously, but I just don't think the technology is there to support the abuse that the police require and the wear and tear and the heavy duty atmosphere that that we need.
Okay, well, thank you. I just hope you keep an open mind to it. I know that, like you say, there's only limited use perhaps in California, but maybe something we could put on the table at some point in the future. All right, if there's no other questions, we will thank you, Chief Stocks, and we'll move on to our next department, which would be Planning Community Development.
Okay, let me just, so building falls under that. So I will move the building commissioner in, and I will move the police and fire chiefs out.
Okay. And so who should we have start? Paul Healy?
Yeah, if you have specific questions on like building and zoning, Paul Healy can answer that. If there's questions on, the overall planning community development department that were not addressed in the general government conversation, I'm happy to address those.
Okay, great. So Paul, thanks for joining us. You have,
Good evening. Yep.
okay. And so what do you feel about the budget? Is there anything that you want us to be aware of in terms of changes or?
Yeah, the only thing I increased, I want to increase my secretary's hours from 30 to 40. I think the department calls for those hours. She's been overwhelmed. She was doing the Board of Health to get the 40 hours, 10 hours of the Board of Health, 30 hours here. It was just too much. There's easily 40 hours worth of work in the building department.
Okay,
I think it's something like a $13,000 increase.
Right.
She has a lot more responsibilities with the rental property registration and the vacant abandoned buildings, keeping track of that. She does, zoning stuff, planning board stuff. There was some mistakes made last year when she was too busy trying to cover the Board of Health as well, which caused some angry residents with zoning board meetings that weren't advertised in time and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely a call for her to have 40 hours in the building department. I was
okay,
just looking at the income for this month. We took in almost $40,000 in permit fees. So it's definitely a revenue generating department. So I think it's called for.
okay, good. And so that part of the budget was submitted and went through by the town manager and they supported that request?
Yeah.
Great, great. Do I have any questions from members of the board?
Nope.
Mark Gold, I see you. Yep. I can't hear you, Mark.
Yes, this is for Lynn,
There you go.
but the question, Lynn, Paul indicated that this clerical employee is already working full-time, just it was only 3/4 with the planning board, and it was 25%, I guess, or 10 hours a week with another group in town. So she's already a full-time employee, so there's no truly added benefits to the town per se. I see Paul Pasterzik shaking his head. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
And I assume that whether, I don't know, whether it's the zoning board or planning board, or whatever, they're gonna backfill and with somebody part-time, is that the intent?
What,
It's actually the health department.
yeah,
The health
that could be
department?
backfilled, right.
Okay, but that's also intended to be part-time?
That'll remain part-time at 10 hours a week, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions? All right. Well, Paul, thank you for being here tonight and
Thank you guys.
good work. We'll see you next year.
Yeah.
All right. So next, and there's no questions on planning budget that I guess, because Lynn would take those if there is any. And if there isn't, then I guess the next is we have schools.
I don't think there's anybody on here from the school department.
No, yeah, you
We
had
don't
that.
have much to say other than
Because we had the
the
joint
budget
meeting.
they submitted.
Right. They already appeared.
Yep.
Okay, so then we go to Public Works.
Yep.
And we have Mario. Okay, Mario Mazza. How are you this
Hello,
evening?
everyone. How's it going?
Good, good. So you want to give us a heads up on the budget, what's new, what we should be thinking about?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, more or less, it's a level funded budget with a couple exceptions. The most significant change to this year is the potential for 4 new employees. One of them's a facilities craftsman, and with 2 new buildings coming online, that makes perfect sense. We're talking about bringing custodial services in-house, so there's a potential for 2 folks there. And that same conversation we continue to have about the grounds, the field conditions and things like that. There's an extra grounds labor in this budget. Wolf Swamp Field's coming on, the ability to, preserve that and make it beautiful for years to come. I mean, I think with the new buildings, it certainly makes sense for these positions, for people to be in these positions, to make sure that these facilities continue to function the way they're supposed to. The other big change, and I know Paul mentioned a little bit about it in your meeting, I think it was a couple nights ago, is related to the storm drain fund, enterprise fund. We, from our MS4 permit, are required to clean our catch basins, every catch basin on a 5-year cycle. I think we have like 4,700 of them. So we're looking to do about 900 of them this year. We're looking to have a contractor do that. And so we got prices for that collection and disposal. And that's somewhere in the area of about 150,000. So those are the 2 real big changes from this year to last. I mean, there's a couple ups and downs. You'll notice that some of our utility costs are going up, and that's because there's 2 new buildings coming on. We estimated what we thought we would need for those buildings. I think there was 25 or 30% increase in a lot of those lines. Our fuel, the fuel we use in our vehicles, the town vehicles, police, fire, DPW, is down, I think, 2/3. And that's because, the DPW site's coming online. We are able to buy fuel in bulk and we're getting a better price. So we're making those reductions. So there's a lot of those little ups and downs, but the 2 big ones were the 2 I mentioned in the beginning.
Okay, great. Any new vehicles coming online that specific?
We have, I think, a handful of vehicles, a couple pickups, I believe a couple mowers that are part of the capital requests. So assuming it makes it through your guys' review, capital planning's review, and town meeting, yes.
Okay, great. All right, any questions for Mario? Mark Gold, please.
Yeah, I can start at the top, Mario, if you don't mind. That, just in terms of, and the way it's split up, just for people who may be listening, there's highway, and then there's building maintenance, and then there's water and sewer, and a couple other things. But in terms of, where we're headed, there's a line item called repair and maintenance streetlights, and that's going to 0. And I'm surprised at that, because this will be the first full year we actually own the streetlights.
Yeah, and I think because they were under warranty, we expected there, and I don't know, 0's the right number, I guess. But I think that we're expecting a far smaller number than years past, mostly because they're warranted.
Okay, I guess my concern is that one of the things I've already seen people saying, can I get a streetlight? Can I get a streetlight? And so maybe that's not under repair and maintenance, but maybe we're just going to account for it differently. But you're right, they should be under warranty. But okay, that was one of the questions I had on that line item. And the other one was, a line that's called other property related service, architectural and engineering.
You're right.
You talk about what that is that had a pretty significant increase.
So we are going to use a firm to update our complete street program. And it's not as simple as just reordering them. There's paperwork and submissions that are needed through the state. And then once you kind of do those, then you can apply for the next round of complete street grants. And so there's some funding in there to make that work, to do that work.
Okay, so that's what that is. Fine.
That's the extra money, yes.
Yeah. The other comment you made that concerned me is the storm sewer clean out. And I had thought that was one of the reasons we bought the $250,000 jet truck, was that we could do that ourselves. Has there been an analysis done of doing it in-house versus this contractor basis, if the contract is really a couple $100,000? And I haven't been able to see where that sits in here, so I haven't really seen it, but have we looked at that at all?
We have. Our truck is not designed for those types of branches, stones, some of the other things that get kicked into catch basins. They probably could have bought one for another, whatever, 15, 20,000 when they bought the truck to get that model that could do that. Ours is really for soft solids, if you will. If you can imagine what that would be when they're cleaning. So it's strictly a sewer maintenance vehicle. And I will tell you that on a handful of occasions when we've needed it to clean out a catch basin for a repair, we've used it, and it can do it, but we're going to run down a $250,000 piece of equipment very quickly for something it was not designed to. So that truck runs pretty regularly. If you look at my monthly reports, it's out usually 15 days of the month. And don't forget, we're not talking weekends. So, on the average month, there's 20 or 21 days. The other days, sometimes we're just doing other things. So it's out doing sewer work, and there's just that much work to do. And then the other piece is, the labor for it. So certainly it would be something maybe worthwhile, but you're talking about equipment costs and labor costs and still disposal costs of what's collected. So all in, over the years, it probably would be cheaper, but to get this program off the ground, I think this is the best approach.
I understand it's not something we're going to do in fiscal 2022, but if we're really only doing, as you said, a fifth of the catch basins each year, basically the year we finish, we start the next year on the ones again. And so it's this is a continual expenditure, $200,000 a year. I don't know what the labor cost is, but 2 employees isn't $200,000 a year. Take the rest and put it toward a vehicle that'll do the trick, and it might pay for itself if we're really, under the demand to clean our catch basins on a 5-year cycle.
I think that's a great approach. I really do. I'm kind of happy to hear you say that, because I often hear privatize, we don't want more employees, find a better way to do this. And so I agree with you. If I could do it my way, yes, that would be how I would design it.
And then maybe we can put something like that on a capital proposal. It's an expensive vehicle. I know, I remember, because I think I was on the capital planning committee when it was bought, or it was on the board when it was, I think it was $250,000 back then. So it's probably
closer to 3.
I assume it, but we're paying $200,000 a year.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
All those costs aren't going to go away. You realize there's still disposal and the labor costs and, the OPEB and all that. But I agree with you, Mark. I think putting the numbers on a piece of paper, it's going to pay for itself probably within that 5-year cycle.
Okay. And the grounds, you said there's potential for an additional, groundskeeper for the fields. That's a year-round position, even though we don't do a lot of grounds during the winter time. What do you envision doing with that, having that person do the rest of the year?
Winter operations.
So it really,
Sorry?
No, so it really, it's just a year-round full-time person then.
Absolutely. And there was a study done, and I don't remember who authored it, but I think we are actually down for communities comparable in our size, 2 folks to be, properly staffed. And so this is a step in the right direction. But yes, you are right. In the winter months, there's not a lot of grass cutting. There's not a lot of line of fields. There's no fertilization. There's none of that normal stuff. They do supplement the emergency repair, emergency weather response team. So they do town hall, fire, police, and I would like to get them on the road in a plow. You probably have heard me talk about this in the past. I am afraid of those multi-day snowstorms. So anything that lasts more than 24 hours, we end up having to take guys off the road and letting them rest, which means somebody's road's not getting plowed, and that's not a great situation. I've tried to get to a 12 on, 12 off type of plow operation. And so adding actually all 4 of these positions gets us closer to that goal. That's my goal. So they do their regular job during the day, and when we need them for these other support services, they're there.
Okay, thank you. And just my last comment is, Lynn, I was around when we privatized the janitorial services in the buildings, and it was a disaster then. And I think that we found that the response we're getting was pretty lousy from our vendor. I think we went through a couple of vendors, and we went through a bunch of people employed by those vendors. And so as tough as it is to say we're going to go out and hire new full-time employees, they're far more responsive for us than I think the janitorial service has worked. On the other hand, there's something to me that says, lawn cutting in the summertime is something that we really ought to look out for outsourcing, because if it really is seasonal, there's a lot of people out there doing it. Although what we found is they don't do it cheaply if you're only using them in the summertime. Thanks, Mario.
Great, thanks, Mark. Any other questions from select board members? Yes, Steve Morantz.
Yeah, question on snow removal. Has anyone investigated? I believe that there's actually, you can take out insurance. So if you get bombed out, which apparently we did this year, and with your scenario of the multi-day snowstorm and or the ice storms that seem to be becoming more frequent, has that been looked at? So, if you run over your snow budget, you're insured, basically, someone else takes the risk. If it's
I can say I've looked at those in the past, and there are a lot of caveats that you really have to be careful on. When they say, 6 inches of snow in a 24-hour period, what they mean is 6 inches of snow on a Tuesday. So if you have a snowstorm that starts at 9 p.m. on a Monday and goes into 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and you get 6 inches, 3 and 3, they count that as 3 inches. There's a lot of little tricks with those when I've looked at them in the past, and I've never have recommended them because of that.
okay.
The other thing, I would like to bring up the issue of the catch basin cleaning, because it is important. Mario did put in a request, a new line item for 140,000. As I mentioned to the board the last time, it was accidentally omitted in the budget presentation in the formats here. I did say that I could probably, through going out and bonding many of the projects that are currently in the debt service portion of the stormwater fund, that I could probably eliminate or reduce that line close to like 70,000. So without changing the bottom line, we could give him relatively a budget of about $70,000 for that, for the drain maintenance cleaning type of thing. So I just want to make sure that the board is fully aware of that. If they have any other questions, that again, we're all here to straighten it out type of thing.
Well, can you go over that adjustment one
Right.
more clearly?
Again, Mario had requested in a new line item, $140,000 for the catch basin cleaning. I did not pick up that $140,000 in all the spreadsheets that I prepared here. So in essence, there is not a new line item in any presentation that was given to the select board. What is presented to the select board is a fairly large increase in the debt service area of the stormwater fund. And basically, it is a large number because I was looking at a 5-year amortization schedule on these stormwater projects. I mentioned to the board that I will be going out and bonding later in the fiscal year, and that just by simply going out to a 10-year debt service cycle or beyond, that I could more than likely reduce that debt service line item to relatively half of what it is, thereby freeing up about another $70,000, about freeing up $70,000 in order to take care and get at least a jump start on what Mario had requested.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And so that, you know, that 140 is just to pay consultants to do the removal? No, I
No,
see.
that-
No, that's for us
That is to actually do the work.
to actually do the work and cover. the
Hire a
costs.
company, come out and do the work.
Okay. Oh, to hire a company to come out.
Right.
Okay. And then, but you know, that I like what Mark was saying about perhaps, you know, getting a vehicle to do that because, you know, although it's a 5-year cycle to get all of these catch basins, but then we have to continue to clean them for perpetuity. I mean, it isn't like this is just, you know, this MS4 restriction is going to just go away after we clean them all. It's going to be ongoing, right?
It is going to be a continued line item within the stormwater budget from here on in.
Yeah. And the other thing about this is, you know, when we remove from those catch basins, I imagine it's mostly leaves and sand and mud and stuff. And is that something that we could put into, you know, recycling? And because it seems like it is, are they considered that clean or is that not clean stuff?
So no, in a lot of cases, it's almost considered hazardous waste. And I think they expect a certain level of motor oil and you know, that type of stuff to
Yeah.
find its way into those catch basins. And therefore it has to be disposed of as such, and it's expensive.
All right, you know, but so even though we wouldn't be able to, the disposal would have to go, you know, through those venues that contaminated soil goes through.
Right.
But the cleaning, it sounds like it might be something that we could look at, especially if we could bond it and pay over time. So maybe that's something we could talk more about in a future budget and so forth. Good. All right, if there's no other questions for Mario.
I have some other comments.
Yeah,
that may
okay,
be questions, but they're more comments on the budget if I could.
yes.
I was wondering if we could ask Lynn and Paul or Paul's successor in each of the utility departments that, and I assume that we're talking about these also, water, sewer, and stormwater. It has a title listed director. And it seemed to me that it would make more sense if it said distribution of DPW director salary or something like that, because I think it's more descriptive of what it really is, unless it is a separate director of our sewer department, and I didn't think it was. And that's really just a title, really. But I, you know, like I said, I look at sewer line 693, Paul, in yours, and I look at the water and you know, which is up above that. And in each case, you know, line 636, and it says director.
Yep.
And I thought that was a distribution based on the other spreadsheet you give us, just a suggestion to make it more.
Yeah.
descriptive.
You know, the possible other thing I could do is actually put in a percentage there, because, you know, Mario's paid probably from 5 or 6 different accounts.
Right, well,
So-
that's covered, that was covered in the DPW budget that you sent, which was great.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can do that, that's fine. I was just thinking that from, really just from perspective, so people understand, we don't have a separate director of the water department. We don't have a separate director of the sewer department kind of thing that, you know, it's just maybe semantics, but I thought it was worthwhile.
okay.
The other quick comment, if I could, because this is the only time I'm going to get a chance to take this, is we've been talking off and on in the town about sewer fees, and Mario, I don't think you've got a lot to do with this, But I just wanted to let people know that Mr. Foster and I have been working on this, and what we'd like to do is we think that for our next meeting, have a report that we would distribute to the select board. I don't know if we're going to talk about it at the next meeting or just it becomes public at that point. We can probably have quick questions and answers, but both Rich Foster and I think that it deserves its own public airing, if you will. I don't know if it's a public hearing or public forum or whatever it is, where the select board and other members of the public who have expressed an interest can talk about that or other things. But clearly there's a move afoot to do something different about the way we bill for sewers. And I just wanted to make sure that I made that public and said that, you know, my anticipation is that by, well, tomorrow's Wednesday, but certainly by Thursday, we'll have something to distribute to the board and our public, in our public packet.
Okay, and well, along those lines, in terms of, you know, the cost of sewers, because I know that's sort of under your umbrella, Mario. There is a citizen's petition, right, if I'm correct, about that issue that we will have to discuss at town meeting. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, Mario?
I think I saw it when it was presented for what would have been the fall town meeting, and I think they were asking for secondary meters.
Okay,
If it's changed or if it's the same, I haven't seen a more up-to-date one. And I think that's also probably going to be talked about a little bit when Mark and Richard, well, when they discuss their ideas.
yeah. But as far as the one that, you know, it looks like a citizen's petition, so we, you know, go on to the warrant, the select board really doesn't make a decision about citizens petitions being on the warrant. How would something like that affect your budget? Would it change what you presented here much, do you think?
Probably not too much. I think we'd end up probably having to buy some meters because the town always, well, you know what? Even I think that probably could be up for debate.
Mario, can I just speak to that just so I can say, you know, without.
He's talking, Mark. Please let him finish.
Go ahead.
And please, Mark, you know, if I say something that's different than what you think is going to happen, I'm by all means. But yes, I think potentially there could be some meter costs. So, and I think when we did this analysis, there's like a 10%, maybe 20 on the high end of folks who would take advantage of this. So that cost certainly would be there. The inspection piece of it might offer another little piece of the budget that might need to be increased. But other than that, not a huge difference.
All right, so when you say inspection, then the resident would have to pay the town to do the inspection, correct?
Yeah, I believe there's an inspection fee on the meter.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mark Gold, please.
Yeah, the scenarios that are evaluated are revenue neutral. That's the best way to put it. So, and they need to be. I mean, it's a sewer enterprise fund. We can't run it as a deficit, and we can't run it to make money. So the intent is that the amount of money we bring in now for sewer fees will be the exact same amount of money we bring in the future. Now, how that's distributed, as Mario said, some of it may come in through secondary billing, some may come in through inspection fees. It was also, and even in the citizens petition, it's assumed that the citizens will pay for their secondary meters and obviously pay to install it. So it's revenue neutral to the town. I will say, just as, because everybody knows that, you know, the big issue is how many people do it. Mario, you said 10%, 20%. We take 5 different scenarios of how many people will take it, up to and including everybody who has a 5-year or less payback, okay? And you can imagine that if, you know, if our sewer revenue is X, and you take out a percentage of that revenue because people are putting in second meters, and you want to be revenue neutral, everybody else has to pay that higher percentage. We've worked that out, and I'm not going to go into that now, but you know, the people who save money are the people who put in meters, and everybody else pays more. And so that's the presentation we're going to look at, and we're going to look at the sensitivity, because once you approve it, you don't know whether a resident's going to put in a secondary meter, and you can't control who puts it in. So we looked at a whole bunch of different levels of meter installation to see what the impact will be on the town water rate for all the little people who don't put in meters, don't water, they're paying $50, and it's shocking how much their sewer fee, excuse me, not their water fee, their sewer fee can go up under that scenario. And that's what we hope to present with a couple of the other things that we've looked at.
Okay, but I just want to clarify, because it seems a little, I'm not clear how it could be, I could see it being revenue neutral in terms of sewage, in terms of what we have to pay the city of Springfield. But I can't see, with his budget for this DPW would be neutral, because if there's inspection fee, there's new revenue coming in to the town if there's installation and inspections. So, right, that wouldn't be, that's not my impression of what revenue neutral means.
It depends on what's adopted, I guess, is a better way to look at it.
Yeah.
If Mark's idea of a revenue neutral proposal gets accepted, then I think the budget that was passed, one way or another, will work itself out. If the town ends up buying the meters, which we do for water meters, your regular water meter, the town owns. When they break, we fix them. There's a couple different schools of thought there. Either you make the homeowner buy them, or you make them buy them from the town, or you own them, and we'll have to work that out. But if we're buying them, and I think they're a few $100, $300-400, depending on how big they are. And you're looking, and I said 10%, just so I can do that math. That that could be like 40,000, right? Does that seem right?
Okay.
So where's that money come from? And maybe that's a special warrant article on fall town meeting. I don't know.
Mhm. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I don't see how it would be neutral. I just see how there'd have to be some costs or revenues, one way or the other.
Well, there could be, I guess, is the short answer.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, and the other question I had is, you mentioned the different positions, the 3 positions or the 4 positions, and you mentioned a craftsperson. And what exactly would they be? I mean, would it be an electrician, plumber, a carpenter? Would it be a person with various skills, or?
Yep, jack of all trades,
Right.
can help out and, kind of fix all the little stuff. I don't know that I need another, not necessarily carpenter, plumber, HVAC guy. And those are a little more expensive of positions, but this is just, somebody responding to, I need help for whatever reason. They're the guy that shows up and kind of helps figure out what's wrong and if they need extra support from a licensed trade.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
have no further questions. I think we can move on.
Before I say goodnight, I know I have water enterprise, sewer enterprise, and storm drain. Are those coming up later, or do we cover those? I just want to be clear.
I have them listed later.
Okay, I'll stick around. I just wanted to make sure I didn't sign off and you guys are looking
Okay,
for me later.
yeah, thank you.
You're
all right.
welcome.
So the next would be community services. And I know that takes in a couple of different departments and areas. So I was thinking maybe we should start with Barry Jarvis and look at the budget. Does that make sense, Lynn? Okay. Good evening,
Hey,
Barry.
everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. So what I can start with is perhaps the general fund and then talk about where most of the programs are funded and the services, which is revolving, and then the 2 smaller revenue accounts we have. So with the general fund, you'll see, and I think like most departments in the community service sector, 2021 or the year 2020 was pretty devastating to most of our programs and our budgets because of the services that we provide. So I think it was the fire chief that indicated that or maybe it was the police chief that kind of went off of 2019's numbers to build 2022. So I did the same, and the biggest difference you will see is within the daycare salaries. And I'm sure, was it last week or perhaps 2 weeks ago, the town manager talked about that and how some of the funding for daycare salaries were reintroduced into the general fund budget. And that should be enough to support the program, at least in the initial stages. And then we should at that point have, by the time fall town meeting comes online, we will have a better idea of what the enrollment is and what the rest of the fiscal year will look like. But for the most part, the 2022 requested numbers are in alignment with past years. With that, moving to revolving, that's where most of our programs are, where most of our services are offered, and where essentially most of our profit centers are. Extended days before and after school, and that tends to be our largest profit center. Day camps, sport camps, and then we have services such as the swimming pools and special programs, events, things like that. We are slowly trying to, and one of the largest goals for 2022 is actually housed in the revolving account, and that's to reestablish our core programs. We went from March of calendar year 2020 through sometime in May, where we really weren't offering any programs or services because we were completely shut down. At the point where May and June occurred, we were starting to reestablish some of our programs, primarily the sports. So we saw Little League and baseball and some softball throughout the summer. We reintroduced some of our adult programming at the Greenwood Center, the volleyball program, and eventually pickleball, which is the senior center. But they utilized the gym. And then in the fall, it was baseball, field hockey, and soccer, which was nice. So we have some programs that are currently online, but most of our larger programs are not. They revolve around school age programs before and after school. We are intending to reestablish for the school year next September. And what else do I want to say about that? So most of the changes we are seeing in the revolving account. So slowly reestablishing our core programs, reopen our facilities, just supporting the residents with the services and the programs that they need and desire. We were able to offer some virtual programs, not as successful perhaps as the real in-person programming, but we did some of that. And that is the revolving fund. And then our two smaller donation accounts, we have our Trelease Scholarship Fund, which is really reliant on special event revenue, primarily the pancake breakfast that we normally hold during Long Meadow Days. And we were recently notified that Long Meadow Days is not occurring again this year. So that account usually has anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 in it. And I think it's almost completely depleted at this point. We utilize that fund to offset scholarship requests. So if there's families in need, they can apply, and if they meet the thresholds, which we use the federal poverty guidelines, and if they meet those, we do offer financial assistance. So we do believe there is a need still, and we have to determine how we are going to support that moving forward. And then we also have a smaller recreation donation account, which is essentially depleted at this point as well, but we do hope to bolster that once we reestablish our programs. We're looking ahead a little bit, even though we're in 2021, we're planning 22, but we are looking ahead a little bit with FY23 and looking at anticipated expenses, one of the largest being Wolf Swamp Fields being complete and usable. So the field maintenance that we anticipate will probably triple for that facility. We're starting to think about the development of funding sources and mechanisms to fund that. And one of the capital requests that we are looking at for 2023 is Molly's Playground. Molly's Playground is at Greenwood Center. And for those of you that have lived in town a long time, you remember Molly McAvoy and her family, and actually her mother and I were speaking last week, and her parents will be involved, hopefully, in the design process of an upgraded playground. So we're looking forward to those things as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
you.
So I had a couple things. So you talk about Wolf Swamp Fields, which I think most people in town have been going by should be getting excited about, because that's going to be such a dramatic change for players. It'll probably look exactly the same when you drive by, but when you're on the field, it'll be a different. Now, one of the arguments is with these enhanced fields that we would be able to hold different contests, across jamborees and so forth, that would generate funds. And does that actually supplement your budget when we have those? Or does it go to the club that runs it?
It would. So I have kind of a mixed answer with that. That's a good source of revenue. I'm not super excited about that particular source. We didn't, in the specifications for this project, we're planting grass. We're not planting sod. So the wear and tear is going to be a real detrimental effect. So I think we need to preserve the facility as best we can. That's not to say we won't have any tournaments, but certainly the established associations would kind of get first grab at that. I think with and outside groups, I think maybe limited. Prior to the facility shutting down for renovation, we did have a couple events each year that were outside events. It wasn't extremely large influxes of revenue, but it certainly did help supplement. I'd rather take a different approach for funding maintenance rather than risk overusing that facility.
Okay, so yes, that makes sense to, let the fields mature, so to speak, in terms of the root systems and so forth. And so last year we were offered, there was a proposal to use the fields at the base, at the high school for soccer or for lacrosse, women's lacrosse, I think it may have been, I'm not specifically sure, or field hockey. But so will that be something that we'll be seeing just more because of where the status of the fields?
We do. I have a good working relationship with the high school and the athletic director, and we try to reciprocate use for each other. There are town fields and certainly the town tennis courts that the high school uses. And we just, again, with all facilities, whether they're at schools or on the town side, we definitely need to think about maintenance and preservation. We're gearing up for spring now. So we have baseball, little league, softball, boys and girls lacrosse. So we are starting to, and actually the boys and girls lacrosse associations respectively work very well together, and they've come up with a schedule sharing with the fields that we have left, and they're minimal. We have, with Wolf Swamp being out of commission, there's different tactics we're implementing. We did it in the fall for field hockey, where perhaps we don't play games and contests in town, but we might pay half of the referees just to pay or to play outside of town just temporarily until we can until we get Wolf Swamp Fields back online. Practices might be cut short if a team is used to a 2-hour practice, perhaps it's an hour, so we can allow for more usage. But the boys and girls lacrosse right now are the two organizations that are scheduled to share fields, and they're doing quite well with that. We also have spring soccer, but we do have a plan for that. All of the associations are making sacrifices during this process. But I think overall, we're all pretty excited about what the outcome is going to look like. I think it will look different. We've reconfigured the paths, the roadways into the park. And I really hope people see beautiful green grass from really far away as they're driving up. So I hope it's a dramatic difference. That's our intention for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then another question. So once the fields are, really at their top, maturity to be ready for competition, is there a person who works in your department that would try to get regional tournaments like lacrosse or soccer or something like that to Long Meadow that would generate income for your department? Or is that something that just somebody else has to do for you? I mean, do we have a person specifically that would do that?
There isn't. And again, I don't think that that would be my first approach to fundraising. All of the individual associations, and not all associations and all sports actually use that facility. But girls lacrosse is a very good example where they have an annual tournament. And they were at the park board meeting last night, and we're starting to think about, well, how can we still host that event for the next 2 years while we are rebuilding Wolf Swamp and not use it? Because what I've seen with communities is once you stop doing an event, another town's going to grab it quick. Wilbraham has beautiful facilities. I'm sure East Longmeadow would like that as well. So we want to try to avoid that. I don't know that we would, again, exploit that facility, especially out of the gate, for that type of usage. We've partnered with a neighboring private lacrosse company for a college recruiting event. Pretty minimal, half a day event, a really lucrative investment for us because it really wasn't invasive. So those types of opportunities, if they presented, I think we would look at them. But again, that's not my first choice for fundraising. Wouldn't be using this facility.
Right, yeah, not overuse. I would never recommend overuse, but just in terms of, we look at sports and we look at developmental sports, and then we look at competitive sports, and there's nothing like a home team advantage. So, having a regional tournament in our backyard really helps our young people feel more comfortable and confident going onto the field. And so that's why I brought that up. The other thing is, in terms of daycare, I would imagine the summer, is it pretty consistent through the year because of working folks, or does it pick up more in the fall, or?
A little bit of both. So we do, in the past, we've had some daycare families that the working parents were teachers. So out of 50 or 60 daycare students, we might have 3 that take the summer off. But certainly for the most part, it's a year-round program.
Okay, so when we look at, potential budget needs, by the fall, we'll have a better indication of what.
We will. So our first kind of plan of action is to look at summer camps and summer hiring. That's a more urgent, just the time frame is more urgent. So getting our advertisement, letting the public know that we do plan on offering summer camp, opening the pool. We do plan on offering day camp, which is the traditional day camp at Greenwood, but also a variety of sport camps. That's still pending because there are issues with school use, because most of the sport camps are dependent on using the inside of the different schools as rain sites. So that's still pending. It's almost the middle of March now. I think by this time next month, we will have a much clearer picture. We've already started provisions for getting the pools up and running. One of the things that, we meaning the DPW and particularly the grounds division, they're a very small group, but they do quite a bit for our town, and they are in charge of the pools. So the cleaning component comes first, as long as we're sure that we won't have any more snow, which we're not sure yet. They can get to moving and focusing on some of the outdoor activities that we have.
Okay, and I guess the last thing would be, when we budgeted, for redoing Wolf Swamp's fields, did that, as part of the developing the field, did it budget in, additional fertilizer and everything so the fields could really do better as far as feeding the grass?
What is budgeted now? No. So we have what we feel are pretty accurate numbers moving forward for what a maintenance plan would look like for that facility. And it would be things like regular maintenance, like mowing, weed whacking, lining for sport, but then also the 5-step system, or however many steps that they do for fertilization and lime and grub control and things like that, that are pretty standard. So those things are additional. We also see it as When we kind of look at a SWOT analysis for this particular facility, we look at one of the threats as people just coming onto the field and using it from different communities. We have that now, or we had that now prior to the field being renovated. So we established that we feel one of the needs is to have almost a field monitor that would be funded through the revolving account, but hopefully subsidized through some of the other funding sources that we're identifying at this point.
Mhm.
So kind of protecting our investment with maintenance, but also kind of prevention of overuse.
Right, good, good, thank you, because those are the two things, it's a big investment for the taxpayers of this town, and, we want to know that you're on top of, making sure that that facility stays at its peak for as much as we can, you can't predict everything, but we do know there's fertilization and cutting and all those kinds of, well, we've always cut it, but I don't know if we fertilized it as we had in the past, so great, that's some questions I have. Questions from other members of the board? Mark Cole.
Thank you, Tom. Yep, Barry, a couple of questions. You alluded to the fact that, most of what people think of as parks and rec programs are run through the revolving account. I think summer camps are run through the revolving account, the sports programs are, dance programs are, that kind of stuff. But one of the clear items that you see on the budget, in fact, it's 37.5% of your budget or something like that, is the daycare salaries is full-time. And so that's why it's getting a little bit of attention, because it's such a large part of your budget, where the others are probably equal dollars, but they run through revenue equals expenses. But the daycare has a major expenses. So my question is, have we really looked at a cost per child relative to outside organizations? And more importantly, at what point do we say, if we want to provide that service and we have a facility, we do it as a franchise? Who's out there, I don't know if it's KinderCare or whatever, who professionally runs a daycare program. They've got certification from the state, who can come in and say, we're going to give the town X number of dollars for the purposes of using their facility. We're going to collect it, but the families will have all the same, the same conveniences of having this facility, but it's not being a core competency of the Park and Recreation Department. It's not a program that you particularly are going to have to run. Is that anything that we've looked at in terms of kind of having our cake and eating, providing the services, but not having this 37.5% of our budget line item?
It's an interesting concept that we haven't. So I'm hearing maybe outsourcing it is what you're saying. It's kind of having a franchise or someone private come in and run it, and maybe we charge rent or something like that. It's an interesting idea that we really haven't explored. The daycare's been in existence probably somewhere around 23 years, something like that. And the extended day and the camps that are also at Greenwood, probably closer to 30-ish years. I'm going to defer to Paul at some point, because there's legal logistics that he could explain much better in terms of why the daycare salaries are appropriated and not funded through the revolving fund. As you know, and I'm sure the select board is fully aware that even though it's allocated through the general fund, it's paid back by the revolving fund because the fees are collected. I wouldn't call it revenue neutral. I think in terms of profit, and again, going by FY19 numbers, just because they're more accurate, extended day camps and daycare are the three primary revenue sources for the department. So even though you see that amount in the general fund, it's actually paid back to the general fund. All the benefits that are attributable to the program are all paid through the revolving fund, and there's still a net of anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 to the town that usually goes back into another program or another segment of the town. Paul, do you want to back me on the actual reason? I know.
With regard to the salaries, the statute that was accepted by town meeting to run a revolving fund for the Parks and Rec does not allow full-time salaries to be paid directly out of it. So therefore, what we do is we budget in the general fund. The revolving fund, through the fees that they collect, reimburses the general fund for those salaries and benefits.
The second quick question I had, Barry, was something about, does the Parks and Rec department, through these same kind of programs, run before and school after activities? And if we do, where are they run? And is it something you do? Is it something school department does?
We do. We run both, which is maybe 50% of recreation departments in Massachusetts, maybe a little bit less, actually run them. And the other 50% that run them either have the school department doing it, or the Boys and Girls Club, or the Y, or someone like that. But the before school programs, for practical purposes, are held in the schools. We don't have the transportation cost. We have them right in the schools. It's a much shorter duration of time. The children can arrive as early as 7:15. School starts about 8:30. So it's a really short time span. And logistically, it makes sense to do them in the schools. However, the after school program, the children receive transportation to the Greenwood Center, which is essentially a recreation center. It's a rec center. They can make choices on their activities. They can go to the gymnasium. They can go to the art room. They can do homework. They have 5 or 6 different room choices. And we do build all of the operating costs of each program, but particularly the after school program, we build it into the cost of the program. So transportation, snacks, staffing, all of those things. In comparison to the daycare, it's more cost effective on our part to run the before and after school, because we don't have the full-time salary cost. So it's a much more cost effective program, as would the day camps be as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Select Board? All right, well, Barry, thank you. Very informative. And I appreciate all your good answers. So thank you, and we'll talk to you next year, I guess.
Hopefully sooner. Thank you.
All right, so next, I was wondering if we could have Jim Layton from the Adult Center, Council of Aging.
Hey, there we go.
Jim, how are you?
How you doing tonight, everybody? Thanks for having me.
Oh, good. So, if you could just give us an update. I know this is going to be a very exciting year for your program. A lot of people are just waiting to get in the building. And I'm sure it's affected your budget a little bit, and just give us a general overview about how we should look at your budget.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I think there's absolutely a lot of excitement that's coming with the new facility. The budget for this year, I tried to do the best I could to keep it level funded when it comes to a lot of our line items. We did have an increase in our administration area, where I was hoping that we could add a clerk position to the new building. I think that would be beneficial going forward to give us some extra coverage. It would also give a little bit of continuity to the position with additional responsibilities when it comes to certain administrative tasks that we foresee growing in the future in the new building. Obviously, right now we do have a smaller staff, and the goal and the expectations of all the new building is going to rise. And we just thought that this would be a good starting point to have another position that was full-time to be able to meet those challenges of the new building.
All right, I like that approach because when you start something new, it's easier to get it right in the beginning and then ride it out than if you shortchange yourself in the beginning and then you're catching up. So I can understand that logic. Is there any questions from the board? Yes, Marco.
Thanks. Jim, first question is, can you talk about what the hours of the current adult center, or pre-COVID-19 hours of the adult center were, and what the hours are planning to be, next year, this time, hopefully?
Yeah, the current hours are 8 to 3, Monday through Friday, and that has definitely met some needs for a long period of time. But I think that we do know that in the new facility, there's going to be hope that they're going to be open later. And I'm in discussion with Lynn and a couple other departments about Park and Rec. We briefly talked about as well when it comes to how we're going to man the hours. Ideally, we could like to keep it open later. The business hours to go to maybe, till 4:30 or even 5. Some of that's going to be based on the needs of the community, what types of programs people want at certain times. I think 8 to 3 is probably a little bit too, it's not enough. And again, because I think people are really going to want to get in there and use it for a number of things that, hours expansion definitely would be beneficial. I'd also have to try to determine too, if there was going to be evening programs, then obviously I'm sure people eventually will want weekend hours as well. So I do kind of have a tentative proposal kind of in play that I was going to be talking with Lynn about at the end of the month, and myself and my staff have kind of strategized this as best we can, because we do think about these things, but some of it was up in the air, obviously, with things that have been going on with the pandemic, but all of that stuff is definitely on the radar screen.
Thank you. The other question I have is about full and part-time staff. I've been on the board for 11 years and so, and seen or 12 years, and seen the staff there go from all part-time staff. Karen Michelman used it as a way to get a lot of different people and keep the costs low, to all full-time staff. And now we're back to part-time staff. And I think, can you just talk a little bit about, the number of people, whether they're full-time now or part-time now, and where you see those positions going? And because I think this budget talks about increasing hours and FTEs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now, the majority of my staff, the office staff, is technically considered full-time. Our office team probably, it's there from about 30 to 35 hours per week, including myself. Then our kitchen staff is considered more part-time. So they're there at a different level of hours per week.
Mhm.
But so everybody's full-time and they're going to stay full-time. So when this says increase in hours in FTEs for administration, what is that? That applies to your desire to go from more than 8 to 3 openings. Is that it?
Yeah, that would increase for the Council on Aging proposed clerk position. So that would be the increase, correct?
The proposed what position? I'm sorry.
It's the Council on Aging clerk position.
Oh, the clerk position. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the select board? Okay, so, so that's exciting to have a clerk. And what'll be some of the duties that you think the clerk will be doing that will be a little bit different? Or that you say, we really need someone to, is there a variety of administrative tasks, or does it have to do with scheduling or anything specific that?
Yeah, I think it would deal with, a lot of things administratively when it comes to potential rental fees. We've been talking about the building use, a lot of other tasks when it comes to possibly helping with billing, payroll, those types of things. Any other fees generated, keeping track of all of that stuff. So I do think that there'll definitely be an increase in kind of having that additional manpower, especially based on the needs of, when the building opens up and the expectation. I think that, it's going to surge, and we're just trying to be prepared for that.
Okay, and so in terms of, is there rental fees, like if different organizations need to rent a room for a function? I mean, is that one of the things that you'll be doing more of, you think?
That's being talked about. Yeah, that's definitely could be a possibility. That's done now over at Greenwood. We've talked about it and entertained the idea, trying to look at some other organizations that similarly do it. So we, I think people are going to want to do that. So that's been discussed as well.
Okay, great. Mark, did you have another question? Yeah.
Yeah, it's more a comment, Tom. I remember talking to Karen Michelman in one of these sessions 15 years ago, So why do you have two part-time clerical people to cover full-time? And she said, the answer was that it was much more flexible because when somebody went on vacation or was out, you know, at least the scheduled outage, they were always had somebody who could fill in. And when she had a full-time person before that, she would always have to scramble to fill in when that person went on vacation, because it's not a department that had multiple clerks. And that's just something I want to pass along, because in addition to being a benefit for the town, employing a couple of people each part-time may in fact be a benefit to the department as well.
Right, yeah, understood. We also do have a revolving account as well, and we were hoping possibly in the future too, we could always utilize that to offset any part-time staff to help with certain, gaps or hours in coverage based on, if we were going to have extended hours and those types of things. So I've been trying to keep that in mind too when it came to possibly adding staff in the future. But I do understand what you're saying, Mark. That has crossed my mind. But I think that staff that we have, we'd be able to kind of offset that.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking clerical more than the professionals.
Okay, so if we have no other questions, thank you very much for joining us, Jim.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Any idea about when the doors might open, the adults?
I keep telling everybody a few months, not really sure at this point, just hanging in there. We've been really doing a bunch of great things at the current center, going through all of our stuff with Meals on Wheels, virtual programs and food pantry, but yeah, hoping to get in there sooner.
Yeah, and we were pretty fortunate, in that we had that final donation from, I'm running a blank now.
Blake.
For the gym.
Oh,
Blake.
right, yep.
I can't, you have to give me his name. I forgot. Blake. Yeah, Blake, yes.
Yes,
And, who has since passed away, and it may have been one of his last donations. And, and he, of course, had built the Longmeadows shops and, pretty vested in our community. But we were really fortunate to have that. And, that's, I don't know what your role was in it. You probably just supported the whole process, but it looks great that we have that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a tremendous amount of support from the community when it comes to the donation. So yeah, very grateful.
Okay, thank you very much and good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we could move to our veterans agent, Lena Velturo. If it'd be good to do that, and then we'll move to the library.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Elena. Thanks for joining us and being patiently waiting. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about, your section of the budget. And it's been a tough year for veterans in terms of getting together. I know that they really miss the annual gatherings that you have. And, because a lot of the veterans are older gentlemen and retired. I know the events I've gone to, they're just so excited to see each other and check in. So it's probably been tough for you not seeing everybody.
It's been very tough. Excuse me, I have a cold, so I'm getting on the tail end of a cold, so I apologize in advance. It has been tough. It's probably one of the biggest things I've heard is that they miss seeing each other in person. We're trying to do some Zoom meetings, but again, as you said, Tom, with the age group that we're in, some of them aren't Zooming, so it makes it a little more difficult. But I have full intentions of the year coming up once we're allowed to socially distance or however we have to do it, but to get together, whether it be outdoors or whatever the parameters are. I think it's really important for their mental well-being and the morale and the camaraderie. But just so you all guys are aware, right before COVID hit, we were able to establish a Longmeadows Veterans Council. So there is that now for the veterans in Longmeadow. Additionally, the American Legion across the street from CVS has now been reestablished nationally. So we haven't been able to announce all this, but it literally happened right before COVID. And with Long Meadow Days, we were going to go ahead and have the opening of the American Legion at the same time, but COVID happened and we weren't able to do any of that. So we have been working on those things. The council and I have had a few telephone conversations and things like that, trying to get together. Other than that, it's just going through with Chapter 115s. I've been helping to deliver food boxes and make sure that our veterans who need assistance on that aspect could. I've gone out and delivered coats to any veterans or their families who need them. So it's just, I tell them all the time that if you need something, you need to ask. Because if I don't know you need it, I can't help you. I can't always promise you I can get it, but I'll do my darndest to if I can. As far as the budget, it's pretty level. I really didn't ask for any increases, and it's, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Okay, well, it looks like it's at a minus 8.93%. So that's, if I'm
So
reading. So that's less than, if that's level, you know, we're leaning in one direction towards.
Well, I say that, but it's by Chapter 115s.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have had some pass away and such as that. So the number has come down the last couple of years because unfortunately we have lost some. So that number has come down with the understanding, and everybody does know that if we do have more people that come on Chapter 115, it does have to be paid out. That's all.
Okay, all right. Well, great. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any questions? Mark Gold.
Yeah, I don't know, Lena or Paul Pasturza, can you just remind me again of the Chapter 115 reimbursement? And I think you said, Paul, once before, it was a year lag. I think that we said that. Is that still the case? And how is that working? You're
Paul,
muted.
you're muted. So it's a 75% reimbursement from the state. We get back 75%. It goes into our general fund because it is a year after the fact. So it goes into the general fund, but we do get 75% back.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Paul, you can take the rest of the night off.
All right. Well, Lena, thank you for joining us and telling us, you know, how things are going. And we just hope that this year you can get together with the veterans. I know how important it is. They you know, they like the activity. They love the activities you put together. And so we'll look forward to seeing more of you next year. Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.
And at last, the Storrs Library can join us, and we can take a look at their budget. I had a very exciting interaction with the library this year. When I found out that because of my age, I didn't have to pay any overdue fines. I was thrilled. Good evening.
Hi, everyone. So my budget's pretty straightforward. You know, no big changes from previous years, or from last year, I should say. It meets the Mass Board of Library Commissioners requirements for certification. This is the second year in a row that we have finally met that certification without asking for a waiver from the state. Prior to last year, it was, I'd say, a good 10 years that we were in a row, we were asking for waivers for certification. So we're where we need to be. Yeah, the bulk of my budget is really salaries, as you can see. This budget is supplemented with private funds from the Friends and from the Board of Trustees. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any questions.
Okay, Mark Gold has one.
Yeah, Gina, thanks for being here and waiting so patiently. I think it would be helpful for people to understand the degree to which the dollar amount to which it's supplemented by the Friends of Storrs Library and other funds. Do you have that number?
Sure, yes. you know, the MBLC, Mass Board of Library Commissioners, have requirements for libraries. How much they expect the municipality to participate, and how much we should spend on materials, books, and circulating materials. So this budget at UC does not quite meet the requirements for circulating materials. So that will be, this will be supplemented by about $12,000 through private funding to fulfill that requirement. Some of the other things that this budget doesn't account for are the summer reading program that's fully funded by the Board of Trustees and the Friends. Programming, if we, any expenses associated with programs that we host, those are paid for privately. We circulate a lot of museum passes. Our fees for the professional librarians to belong to professional organizations or go to conferences or do professional development, that is all paid privately. The board also has financial obligations. They pay for insurance on the materials, and some of the, they reimburse the town, actually. The town sends us a bill for the insurance and the Board of Trustees pays that. They pay for grounds maintenance. So there's a lot of financial obligations that are outside of this budget that are paid for through these private, the Board of Trustees and the Friends.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions from the board? All right. Well, I know it took a long time to sort out the agreement between the town and the library, and it sounds like you're happy with the way things worked out, because we don't need to look for those waivers any longer.
Right.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And like, Mark pointed out, there's a lot of benefits to the town, in terms of the library as association and being this separate entity that gets donations to keep it going. And so it's good. Now, so if this budget is, as COVID changes and folks can go into the library more, is that going to affect your budget more, or is this, you feel pretty confident you're going to be in good shape, or did you plan on maybe, less people being in the library less often?
Well, we just opened again today for patrons to come in. So that was it's very exciting to get back to that point.
Okay.
And people were so excited to return. So that was great. There's so many unknowns with the pandemic that, we don't know when we will have in-person programming again, right? All of our programming has been virtual. So we really don't know when we can have big numbers of people in the library again. So that's an unknown. I have had some staff on furlough for a good part of the pandemic. They have slowly been returning. So, yes, there's variables that are unknown from a budget perspective. I do know, last year there was money salary from the salary line item that wasn't spent, that was returned to the town because of our furlough situation. I anticipate the same thing again. But as I said, the staff are slowly coming back from furlough. So hopefully when the world returns to a normal situation, we'll be, utilizing the full budget once again.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if there's no further questions, we thank you for stopping by, waiting out, and it's great to know that the library's open. There's something I want to pick up. Maybe I'll stop by tomorrow.
Sure.
Have a good evening.
All right, thank you all.
you know. And so the next thing is to go back to our water and sewer budgets. And so Mario, if we could bring him back on, if we have any questions for him. Okay, welcome back. I know you've been listening though.
Yes.
So any questions on the water sewer budget, or Mario, I guess we shall start. Is there anything about this budget that's different or surprising for the board to think about?
No, and the one other one you didn't say, but I'm gonna throw out there is solid waste recycling budget.
Yes.
More or less, they are level funded. The increases you see in, I think, every case is related to the contract increases that our vendors that we've hired to do that work, we've negotiated, and that's just part of the contract. Obviously, our water amount is given to us by the Water Sewer Commission. Some of our bonding stuff, if you're curious about that. Paul could probably tell you a little more about that. Same with the sewer fee. And then obviously we talked a little bit previously about the big increase in the storm water enterprise fund, and we can go over that in more detail, or we can move on to different line items in that budget if you choose to.
Okay, so great. Thanks for starting us off. Do we have any questions? No, nothing from Mark, nothing. All right, I guess now the only thing with recycling is in the past, we used to be able to get some money back from recycling plastics, and then they said, because China wasn't interested in our plastics any longer, it changed. Any predictions about that area of recycling?
I don't have a good prediction or a good sense of where that market is going. I'd like to tell you that in the next 5 years or so, it's going to bounce back, but only time will tell. I don't know if Paul or Lynn have heard anything through your contacts about that, but okay.
Okay, and we did get the new garbage cans on board, and it looks like everybody's using them appropriately. It took a little while to get people to get the lids down and so forth. But has that made a difference? Like, I know it's going to be a little while till we go to renegotiate a trash haulage contract, but did you get any feedback on that, or is that really kind of separate?
That was an effective endeavor in that I think we've standardized the barrel, and people who had been taking advantage of the system with larger barrels either cut down on their waste and figured out how to recycle better, or started buying the bags. And we did see a big increase in the bag purchases. Big Y mostly is the one who's doing it, but we used to get a few through the DPW's building.
Mm-hmm.
Some things have changed with COVID, and it was hard to kind of track the numbers and the tonnages as schools closed and people were home. So the numbers aren't perfect, but pre-COVID, that's how it was working.
Okay, yeah. And then during COVID, everyone was cleaning their house.
Well, and you were home all day, where your kids were at school. Now they're home, they're making a mess, and you're probably throwing away more things than you did before. It was a little off.
Okay. And then the other place people can buy those bags is from the DPW recycling center, but hasn't been open that much. Any idea about when that might open, or?
Yeah, I think we just picked that date. I think it's the last Saturday in March is what we eyed as the regular season. So during the winter months, we just do that half a Saturday, and then we go to regular schedule. I believe it's going to be the last weekend of March, which means it's Saturday, Sunday, and then the Wednesday.
Okay. And then, but the swap shop would still be on hold, or will you open it?
Yeah, it'll just be as it was pre-COVID for now. Most of that swap shop is run by volunteers, and I don't know how comfortable they are coming back to do that work yet, but I'd like to think as the vaccine rolls out and people, they get it and feel a little more comfortable. But yes, that I see it maybe midsummer or around that time when that could open again.
All right, good. Because I imagine there's a lot of folks who, when they're sorting through during the COVID, they have things they say, I should put this in the swap shop. I don't want to just throw it, throw it away.
Certainly.
So that's good news, and I'm sure people will be asking about that. So, and this will be the last time you meeting with the select board. And so we wish you, as a chair, I wish you good luck in your future endeavor in town of Agawam. And, you've done a great job for us and wish you'd stay, but that things happen, but maybe you can help us recruit someone who could take your place.
Yes, I appreciate that. I do anything I can. There's a strong team of men and women over there. I'm leaving you in good hands, but most certainly I'm only a phone call away. And if I could assist in the recruitment, I would.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this new building, you won't be very long. Will you be in it at all? Probably not.
Well, I hope so. So it's funny you bring that up. We're working on getting the final documents in place to open it up. And I think that could happen as soon as maybe tomorrow or the end of the week. And if that's the case, I will have a week in the new building. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Okay. All right, Mario. Again, thanks for all your help over the years and best of luck. And
My pleasure. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
okay, good night now. All right. So there's a few items left in the budget that we can discuss and, includes, capital and liability and property insurance, employee retiree benefits, debt service. Is there anything that, I guess, Lynn, when you look at those topics, is there anything that you or Paul would want to mention about those areas?
Nothing that sticks out to me. I don't know if you have something, Paul.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I would bring to your attention, and you probably have noticed it already, we started off with the assumption on the OPEB liability going from the 500,000 last year to a 2.5% increase originally. The select board then created a policy that would have increased that number to roughly $646,000, 647. Obviously, it was one of the choices that Lynn and I had made or proposed here that, we couldn't afford the full 0.25% increase in that line item. It does go up from the 500,000 to 581,000, a little bit over half. But again, if we had gone to the full amount, we would have been sacrificing either services or manpower somewhere.
Okay, thank you. And, that's, things that we have to do. And I know that the only thing, in the last meeting, you had talked about how performance of the, that fund is invested in a way that there was a return of over 400, close to $500,000.
Great.
Right. So that was pretty exciting. Okay. So is there any questions from the board on these other areas? I see Steve Morantz. Yes.
Yeah, a question on, well, like you said, the OPEB budget was cut in half. You're saying nothing is going into the operational stabilization fund. Is that correct? I mean, there's a big number going in this year on the warrant, but for budgeting for next year, there's nothing budgeted to go into the stabilization fund. Is that correct?
There is nothing budgeted from operating revenues. We will have a large chunk that will be proposed to go in from free cash at the annual town meeting, but from operations or operational revenue, again, it was something else that we just could not afford to put anything in.
Right, and so the big number that's going in this year is because of reduced expenses, plus I assume last year there was a number that was set to go in last year's budget. Is that correct?
When we started the FY21 budget, we had originally, again, I do want to go back a step because Originally, the OPEB amount for FY '21 was in the vicinity of $750,000. Marie Angelides, the chair at the time, had proposed to drop that because he thought it was a kind of a high number, to $500,000 to go to the OPEB. And then the remaining $250,000 would have come out of operational revenue, and that would have gone into the operational stabilization fund. That was part of the March 2020 proposal, meaning the original FY '21 budget that was done last year at this time. However, when COVID hit, the Board of Selectmen had to revise their budget they revised it in May. And that was one of the first things that was taken out last May. Again, the $250,000 that was originally in there was taken out because again, we just couldn't afford it. Or if it was put in there, it would have been offset by service cuts and personnel cuts.
Okay, second question is, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of some of the warrant items, aren't they increasing? Are we taking some sort of debt out in fiscal '22? Because you keep talking about debt service won't go up because debt won't increase, but isn't our debt going to increase? Or am I misreading these warrant articles?
The increases, and again, I don't know if this is answering your question, Mr. Morantz, but the increase that you see in the debt service of the $624,000 in retirement of long-term debt, that is basically because of the schedule that was set up for funding of the DPW and the Council on Aging, that we wanted gradual increases on the impact of the excludable debt on the tax rate. But FY '22 will be the last time you see these large increases. FY '23, you will start to see a leveling off of the impact of the excludable debt on the tax rate. So we have this one more step to get through in FY '22, and then it levels off in FY '23.
Okay.
Okay, good. Is there any other questions? Mark Gold.
Yeah, I might, again, more comment than question. It's on pensions, retirement benefits and payments for town employees. And we hear in the news there's a lot going on with the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board. I understand that what we've got for a budgeted increases in those pensions, but I'd like to ask Mr. Chairman that at the next meeting, we put together and prepare a statement from the select board about the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board and their activities. Tonight, it's not on the agenda. We won't take it up, but I believe that it's something the select board ought to do. So I'd just like to publicly make that comment and request.
Yeah, actually, I do have that on the agenda.
It is on the agenda, yeah.
It is? Okay, great.
It's number 5. It's on the agenda. But I don't know if there's any additional comments in regards to our budget, in regards to Mark's comments. Paul, anything, or Lynn? No. Okay, so we'll talk more about that as we conclude this section of the meeting. And, I have no other additional comments or questions I can think of at this point. So if that's it, then we will close this. And again, tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, we will be having another meeting, a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and open public comment on the budget. So we'll continue on. So if we've missed any questions tonight, we can always bring them up tomorrow. So why don't we move on to the discussion about the Hampden County Retirement Board. And, we received a document, Lynn received a document of an assessment or an audit that was done on the retirement board. We did mention it, I think, in our last meeting. And So Mark asked if we put this on the board or on the discussion tonight because you went to a meeting recently that, they talked to the board chair and you wanted to make some comments in regard to their response to the audit, correct?
You're suggesting it to me? Sure, I'll be glad. I mean, I was on the call, Lynn was on the call, Paul was on the call, and a few other people from Longmeadow were on the call. I mean, it was covered extensively in the newspaper, and I'm not going to kind of recap what the entire call was, but my take on it was that the behavior that was described and in the audit and appears to have occurred is not something that we would tolerate in any board anywhere in town or in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We shouldn't tolerate it by the members of the board of the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board, or the executive director to a large extent, who's also responsible for the activities. And I think that the select board of Longmeadow ought to take a strong stance and call for the resignation of the board and call for a resignation of the executive director so that they can replace with people who are following not only the letter of the law, which we believe may have been not followed, but certainly the spirit of the law, which wasn't being followed either. And so that's where my opinion is, and I hope to get everybody else to agree that it needs to start somewhere. I'd like to start with the Longmeadow Select Board.
Okay, but just in terms of, limiting those positions, I know, on the state level, when things happen incorrectly on boards, this happened a few years back on the parole board where they made a bad decision and all the members involved in that decision were eliminated from the parole board, 6 people, which was a big deal. And so could the governor take everyone off of this board? Is that a person who could do that? Or I know it'd be nice if they resigned on their own, but could the governor remove them? Do you know? Does anyone know?
It's way above my level of authority, Tom. I mean, the comment that came back was that they've got terms on the board, and there was no rush to do anything about it. Whether it's the Attorney General's office or the State Board of Ethics does or whatever, I don't know. But I like I said, it's my belief that the behavior that was demonstrated isn't something that we should tolerate for people who are managing $450 million, give or take, of regional government employees' pension funds. And so, whether they are forced out or not, I don't know, but that's not my call here. My call is that it's like the Longmeadow Select Board voting no confidence in them and asking them to resign. And that's where I am on this. And I will tell you that I think I think that we put our professionals, Lynn and Paul, in a tough position. They have to work with them every day. And so that's why I'm looking at the select board to really step out on this thing and say, this is where it needs to go. And I'm trying to do this, Tom, without, throwing darts at individuals, naming names and getting very specific. I think the accusations or the findings of the audits speak for themselves. And, and if people on our board want to go into why I believe this, I'll be glad to, but I'd rather keep our discussion at a more elevated level. I mean, there were clearly things that were said in that meeting that just don't jive with the way a board and a board chairman should be running an organization. And more importantly than that, and I think I'd said this, I had a reporter ask me about a comment, they also haven't been doing such a great job in managing the funds, and to me, that's kind of their number one job. And they can say, well, we got an 8.5% return from Prim, but what the return is from Prim and what the growth was in the actual funds that the board came back, like somebody pointed out, since 1995, they're still funded at below 50%. And we've had one of the best stock market runs in the last 30 years that you can imagine. And they're still funded below 50% of their actuarial funding, level. So, I mean, all those things together, without throwing personnel issues out there, lead me to say that I have no confidence in them. I think the select board shouldn't have confidence in them. And I'm hoping all the regional boards of all the organizations that have their pension plans invested with them have no confidence in them.
Okay.
My question is in terms of them, since this report was ended in 2017, which is also, I mean, I'm not sure why we're getting it now, but it's in 2017, are the same people who were responsible from 2014 to 17 still on the board in 2021?
Yes,
The board has not changed one iota?
correct.
Wow, all right.
No.
Therein lies the problem, Steve, as they say.
That answers that question. Okay, I got it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And do we know why this report came out 3 years after the fact?
Lynn might speak to that more, but my understanding is that the audit was done by PERIC, which is the pension board for the state. They do everything in arrears. I mean, this isn't the annual audit kind of like our town does. This is a more or less a compliance kind of thing that PERIC went in to do. That was my understanding. Lynn, is that what yours?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
So it wasn't an annual, the fact is, we don't know that there's been an annual audit other than some numbers from that date.
It was more like someone said, hey, it's about time to audit these people in 2020. Let's look back to 2014 through 17.
There seems to be an indication that PERIC is doing that 2017 through 2020 review.
Right. And I think if I understand correctly, I also think that the retirement board does do an annual audit. They have an auditing company, and they do one every year. I'll reserve my opinion on that.
They have a financial audit annually.
Mhm.
I think the one comment that I will make, and it goes back to a question that came up earlier. I believe the chairman of PERAC made the statement that it would take special legislation to remove any of those elected officials from that board. So, unless they resign, they're there for the remainder of their term or until they're defeated in some type of an election.
Okay, thank you. So, and, the governor is a person who could make special legislation, and probably get things moving on that. But it's I think that our board should show some leadership and let other boards in communities, surrounding communities in Hampden County realize that, that this is unacceptable behavior. I have no problem, agreeing with you, Mark, that I think they should all resign. I actually would go further and say that the governor should step in, or our local legislators should step in to take action to have that board disbanded. Even though they're talking about term limits, which means they don't want to leave, so they're going to have to be forced out. Now, the question is, should we take action on this today, or should we wait until Monday's meeting and vote on it with a full board?
There are good reasons. I suggest we take action on it today.
Okay. All right.
Do we want to also ask if it's appropriate to refer this to the Attorney General? I mean, that's
Been done,
sounds
Steve.
like-
That's been done.
I mean, in our letter, you mean?
Yeah,
I think that's already been done. The Attorney General and State Ethics Board, I believe that's been done. Lynn, is that your
Yes.
understanding also?
Yes, yeah.
That's why it wasn't included, Steve.
okay.
And so would we want to send a copy of our letter to the governor's office?
Fine with me.
I would feel good about that, send it to the board, asking for resignations and CC it to the governor's office. And I think
I think we should also our state legislature. I mean, anyway, I think it should go out to as many folks as possible.
Well, and I think it ought to be made known to the other boards that have, their funds invested in the Hampden County Regional. That's what I'm looking at doing, is kind of starting the wave moving of other boards doing the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so with that idea in mind, then why don't we, can we entertain a motion to have a letter sent from the board?
I'll make that motion that we have a letter sent, that we write a letter expressing no confidence in the executive director and the board of directors of the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board.
Second.
All right, and we've already sort of talked that, we'd send this to various places, so we don't have to really put that in the motion. Any further discussion? Okay, so Lynn, will you do a roll call vote?
Yep. Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
3 yes.
So you-
Is there a draft letter already that I haven't seen, or did you want us to draft something here?
Well, I sent you some stuff, Lynn, that we can put
Yeah.
together. I mean, if the board wants to take a look at it before it goes out, that's fine. I don't think, Lynn, you should be writing it, only because of your position as a professional in the town. I mean, I think that what I sent you pretty much spoke to it, and and it said that the town of Longmeadow calls for the immediate resignation of the board, its chair, and the executive director of the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board. Their actions relative to what appear to be violations of state ethics regulations, as well as the response to the audit that was conducted by PURAC, indicate to us that they are unqualified to continue to lead an organization that manages over $450 million in assets for the retirees of our regional government organizations.
Okay, so
I think the entire board should see that before it goes out. I mean, it sounds fine to me, but
That's fine, Steve. I have no problem with it.
so we could, so Lynn, tomorrow I'm going to be coming by the office, and we'll take a look at that and put that together before our 2:00 meeting, and then we can run it by the board, and then.
Yeah, I have that meeting as a virtual meeting. I have,
Oh, I see.
and you'll get that invite in the morning, but
Mhm. So, yeah, if you have.
we can work it up. Yeah, and we can put it on letterhead, what Mark wrote.
Okay, yeah, or send it to me, and, either way, so we'll put that together. We'll send it by the board, and then if people have any corrections or any additions, let us know, and we'll make a list of sending it to, I believe, the governor's office, our state senator, our state representative, and then to each member of the board. We'll need to get those addresses, asking them to resign. So, and should we send us a copy of this letter, do a press release also?
I certainly think so. If we want other boards to know what we're doing, they ought to.
So let's, we could send it to, well, you have a group of people you send it to, Lynn, but, definitely the Springfield paper and the reminder kind of thing. So, good. Thank you. I think that's a good step to take, because a lot of people count on the Hampden County Retirement Board. And, if it goes belly up, if they screw up, I mean, it costs people money. When they use funds that should be going to retirees, it's not a good thing, So, all right. And I believe we're through our whole agenda. And so I would
Lynn,
like-
are we going to get a link, you said tomorrow, for tomorrow night's meeting?
We did get a link. It was on the email that was just after the one that we were used to get into this meeting.
Okay, I'll go back, look, I didn't see it. I mean, the agenda I have from this meeting is Seems to be an older one, but. I'll
Okay,
look.
I can resend. I think Debbie might have sent them last week before she left, but I can
Yeah,
resend them.
I remember getting this one. I don't remember ever getting the second
So
one.
I see it, but I can just tell you that it was sent on March 1st from Deb House. Agenda posting for select board budget forum and joint meeting with finance committee.
Okay,
If you can't find it, yeah, Lynn can resend it to you. But it's there, March 1st. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Okay, Tom,
Yes, Lynn.
Mark,
yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. Okay, great. All right, good night. Those watching, hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow night. Bye.
Thanks.